From code to cortex, why your manual trading strategy is now obsolete. Neuralink trading, the unfair advantage in the 2026 market reset. You've been told that fast traders are the ones with the best algorithms. That's not true anymore. The most dangerous traders in 2026 aren't running faster software. They are not co-locating servers closer to exchange racks. They've done something that no software patch or fiber upgrade can compete with. They wired their brains directly into the market. Not metaphorically, literally. Neural computer interfaces are no longer science fiction. They are not experimental. A small close class of trading firms has been quietly deploying medical-grade neural implants to give their traders one decisive advantage. They can execute a trade before your finger even touches the mouse. Think about what that actually means. Every millisecond of latency you've ever tried to reduce by upgrading hardware, internet connection, platform provider, dwarfed by the gap between your motor cortex firing and your hand moving. That gap is approximately 200 milliseconds. Doesn't sound like much. In high-frequency arbitrage, it's a geological era. The fastest human trader alive is still slower than a thought. That's the war you're walking into. When most people hear high-frequency trading, they picture servers. Cold rooms, blinking lights, quants writing algorithms in languages nobody recognizes at a cocktail party. A battle between machines with the humans off to the side. Programming. That picture is already outdated. The competition in high-frequency arbitrage was never really machine versus machine. It was always about who could shrink the loop between intention and execution the furthest. Algorithms was a leap, co-location was a second, but both of those still had a ceiling, because both still required a human to set the parameters. What happens when you remove that ceiling entirely? What happens when the human brain isn't the input device? It's the execution engine. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly where serious analysis gets replaced by science fiction. So let me be precise. We're not talking about mind-reading machines or AGI. We're talking about a specific biological fact. Neural signal latency from the prefrontal cortex to BCI output device in 2026 hardware has been reduced to the range of 5 to 15 milliseconds. Compare that to the 150 to 250 milliseconds it takes the same brain to move a hand and click a mouse. Neuralink trading isn't a gimmick. It's not a concept. It's a redefinition of who gets to be fast. Brain-computer interface research didn't begin in a trading firm. It began in hospitals. Neuralink's first human trial was cleared in 2024. BrainGate had been running experimental protocols for nearly a decade before that. The original use case was medical, restoring motor function to patients with paralysis, translating neural signals into cursor movement, speech, complex device control. None of that is controversial. It's documented. It's peer-reviewed. What's newer, and what financial media has almost entirely ignored, is how quickly that medical infrastructure got reverse engineered for performance applications, not by hackers, by firms with the resource to hire the same neuroscientists who build the medical hardware and ask a different question. Not how do we restore a lost function, but how do we optimize an existing one? For 2 years, this development was invisible to mainstream market observers. A few specialized outlets caught it. Most financial journalists either missed it or decided their readers wouldn't take it seriously. 3 things happened in 2025 that crossed a threshold. Implant miniaturization hit a cost viability point where outpatient procedures became feasible for non-medical clients at price elite firms could absorb as an operating expense. Exchange API protocols were updated in a way that, intentionally or not, open a data feed pathways that BCI output devices could interface with directly, bypassing keyboard and mouse import layers entirely. And during the volatility spikes of 2025, the latency gap between augmented and non-augmented traders became visible in the order book data to anyone who knew what they were looking at. The window didn't close slowly, it closed all at once. In a quarter, most retail participants remember as just another rough patch. Let me explain what the latency wall actually is. Most discussions of it are imprecise in ways that matter. When you decide to execute a trade, that decision starts in your prefrontal cortex. The signal travels through your motor cortex, down your spinal cord, through your arm, into your fingers. The entire biological chain takes an average 150 to 250 milliseconds. The wide range depends on fatigue, arousal state, caffeine, half a dozen other factors. That 200 millisecond window isn't empty. It's full of market movement. At the scale of high frequency arbitrage, 200 milliseconds contains hundreds of quote updates across correlated instruments. It contains the full life cycle of micro inefficiencies that exist only because two prices haven't yet found each other. Those inefficiencies aren't large, they are fractions of a tick, but a volume, they are the entire business model of the firms that capture them. A Neuralink trader doesn't eliminate the decision process. That would require a different kind of intervention entirely. What they eliminate is a physical transmission delay. The brain still decides, but the execution is immediate. The intention to trade formed in the prefrontal cortex is read by the BCI device and transmitted to the exchange API in the 5 to 15 millisecond range. The motor cortex never fires, the arm doesn't move, the hand never touches anything. The trade is placed before the body is even involved. This isn't incremental improvement, it's a removal of an entire physical layer from the execution chain. Every retail trader, every fund manager using conventional interfaces, every algorithmic system that requires human sign-off, anywhere in the loop, they are all operating on the far side of a latency wall that can't be reduced by buying better hardware. Because the bottleneck isn't hardware anymore, it's biology. You can upgrade your spinal cord. That's the problem. Here's what the coverage of neurotraining actually misses. This story isn't just about speed. Speed alone was already being solved by algorithmic systems. Pure algorithmic HFT has been operating in the sub-millisecond range for years. If raw speed were the only variable, the algorithms would have already won. They haven't, not completely. The reason is something genuinely difficult to quantify but not impossible to observe. The human pattern recognition system does things that current AI models still can't replicate, particularly in novel market conditions. An algorithm is trained on historical data. Its pattern detection is a function of what it's seen before. When market structure shifts in a way that has no historical analog, a well-designed algorithm either misses it or overreacts. The technical term for this distribution shifts. The practical result, during genuine market dislocation, pure algorithmic systems often perform worse than a sophisticated human trader who is actually paying attention. The Neuralink trader captures both advantages simultaneously. Their execution speed matches or exceeds the fastest algorithmic systems, but their pattern detection draws on biological intuition that isn't constrained by historical training data. They can sense something wrong in a market before they can articulate what it is, and they can act on the sense faster than any physical interface allows. During the three major volatility events of Q3 2025 documented order flow analysis, which several quantitative research desks have since published, showed consistent patterns of what they called anomalous early positioning. Traders who'd entered positions before the news was public, before algorithmic traders fired, before any conventional signal would have prompted action. Some of that is information advantage. Some of it is probably illegal, but some of it is a hybrid feedback loop operating exactly as designed. The brain sees something, the link executes it. The body never had a chance to second guess. An algorithm backtests history, a neurotrader sends the present. That difference is worth billions. This technology doesn't distribute itself evenly. Nothing that expensive ever does. Three camps are forming around it. they have very different relationships to what's happening. The first camp has already deployed a small number of quantitative trading operations, primarily based in the US and UK, with satellite presence in Singapore and Dubai. Not the famous names, private shops with headcounts under 50, AUM in the hundreds of millions, and profit per employee ratios that would embarrass most hedge funds. They are not talking publicly. Their competitive advantage depends on silence. The second camp knows about it and is moving toward it. Tier 1 banks, established HFT shops, a few well-capitalized prop trading firms, they are in the research phase, recruiting from neurotech companies in conversations with the same device manufacturers who supplied the first camp. The cost barrier is real, surmountable. The entry timeline is measured in months, not years. The third camp is everyone else. Retail traders, mid-sized fund managers, regional institutions, they are not in the race. They can't get there, not at current device cost, not under current regulatory frameworks, not without the legal and medical infrastructure to manage the liability of surgical intervention. Markets have always had layers. What's different now is that the lowest layer isn't just slower than the top. It's operating on a fundamentally different kind of latency, biological versus electronic, and that gap doesn't narrow over time, the way technology gaps usually do. Singapore's monetary authority has begun preliminary discussions about disclosure frameworks for augmented trading. The SEC has an internal working group. The FCA acknowledged in February 2026 letter to Parliament that it was monitoring developments. None of them have acted. The regulation is years behind the technology. It always is. But this time this thing is chasing its inside someone's skull. You might be thinking this doesn't affect you, that you don't trade in the time frames where this matters, that your strategy is long-term or value-oriented, or you're an index fund and none of this touches your portfolio. I want to address that directly. The structural inequality created by Neuralink arbitrage doesn't stay contained in the microsecond layer. It propagates upward. Price discovery, the process by which a market finds the true value of an asset, depends on information being processed and reflected in prices over time. When a class of participants can trade on micro inefficiencies faster than any other class can even perceive them, the information embedded in price movement changes character. Price begin to reflect the aggregated execution patterns of augmented traders rather than the collective judgment of the full participant pool. This isn't theoretical. It's visible in a widening divergence between implied volatility signals and realized volatility that several options desks noted in the second half of 25. The two signals, which historically tracked each other within predictable ranges, began decorrelating in ways existing models couldn't account for. The standard explanation in macroeconomic noise. Some of it may be, but some of it is a market where price formation is increasingly driven by participant class that's invisible to the instrument used to measure market health. Two systems are being built right now. One is the augmented layer, fast, biological, close to new entrants, largely unregulated. The other is the conventional layer, where retail participants, algorithmic systems bound by standards interfaces, and institutions that haven't crossed the implant threshold all compete with each other. These two layers share a price feed. They don't share the same access to opportunity within it. Staying in the conventional layer and competing there, that's not actually safe, because the conventional layer's price discovery is now downstream of the augmented layer's execution. The price you see have already been shaped by trades you couldn't have made. What's being destroyed here isn't just retail competitiveness. It's a premise of a level market. Financial market justifies their social function on the argument that price discovery is distributed across a wide participant base with access to the same public information. That argument was already strained by decades of algorithmic advantage. Neuralink trading doesn't strain it. It breaks it. Not because Neuralink traders have better information. because they exist in a different temporal reality. They are trading in a version of the present that conventional participants can't access, not because of what they know, because of how fast they can act on what they already know. This is documented. The BIS quarterly review from December 2025 noted in the careful language academic papers use when they want to say something alarming without alarming people, that certain order flow asymmetries in correlated asset pairs were consistent with a participant class operating below standard measurement thresholds for human reaction time. The IMF's January 2026 Global Financial Stability Report included a footnote 47, page 31, if you want to find it, acknowledging that neuro-augmented trading posed novel challenges to existing market surveillance frameworks. These aren't fringe sources. They are the most cautious institutions in global finance, and they are writing about it in footnotes because they don't yet know what to do about it. And the footnote is the tell. When the IMF puts something in a footnote, it's not dismissing it. It's buying time. So where does that leave you? 5 things to orient yourself in what's happening. Number 1, this isn't reversible in the near term. The technology exists. The firms using it are profitable, and profit is the most powerful regulatory capture mechanism ever invented. Don't wait for regulators to solve this before it affects you. 2, the strategies most insulated from neural arbitrage operate on longer time horizons and less liquid instruments. Not because they are safe, but because the microsecond advantage matters less when the opportunity is measured in days, not fractions of a second. 3, the cost of this technology will fall. It always does. The question is whether the regulatory framework will be in place before the second and third tier of adopters bring it to a scale that mainstream participants can't ignore. 4, the firms in the middle. Tier 2 banks and established HFT shops are the most dangerous actors in the current moment. They are close enough to this technology to be tempted and resourced enough to get there. When they arrive, the shift from edge case to structural feature happens fast. 5, the disclosure debate is coming. Whether augmented trades should be labeled differently in the order book, whether firms must disclose BCI usage to regulators, whether exchanges themselves have an obligation to detect and segregate Neuralink order flow. These questions will define market structure for the next decade. Most retail participants don't know they have even been asked. There's a version of the story that ends in the market becoming genuinely symbiotic, where augmented participants provide liquidity and price efficiency that benefits everyone, including the unlinked. That version requires regulatory architecture that doesn't yet exist and political will that hasn't yet materialized. The other version, the one being built right now by default in the absence of any action, is a market where participation means something different depending on what's in your skull. Which version we get isn't a technology question. It's a question about what we decide markets are for. And while that question sits unanswered in regulatory working groups and IMF footnotes, here's the thing I keep coming back to. If the firms that already have this advantage also have the most lobbying power, the most access to the people writing the rules, and the most to lose from disclosure requirements, who exactly do we think is going to answer it? If you're here for noise, scroll. If you're for deals, stay. Crypto shorts.